Hey everybody, thought I would try to get us to keep going with our read aloud, the Abarat. So we're on chapter 5, and where we left off was Candy had left school, had walked to the end of that street where the woman had the pinwheels in the lawn. She was the last house, and then she walked out into that field. So this is where we're starting. Chapter 5. It is A Shore Without a Sea. So here we go. After perhaps 10 minutes of walking, Candy glanced back over her shoulder to see that the gentle swells and gullies she'd crossed to get to her present position had put Chicken Town out of sight completely. Even the spire of the church on Hawthorne Street and the 5 stories of Town Hall had vanished. She took a moment and turned on the spot. 360 degrees in every direction, the landscape presented the same unremarkable vista of wind-blown grass and 2 exceptions. Some way off to her right lay a small copse of trees, and nearly dead ahead of her was a much more curious sight, a kind of skeletal tower set in the middle of this wilderness of grass and flowers. What was it? Some kind of watchtower? If it had been a watchtower, then those who'd occupied it must have been very bored with nothing to watch. Though it promised to be nothing more than a near ruin, she decided to make it her destination. She'd get there, sit for a while, and then head back. She was getting thirsty for one thing. She wanted a glass of water. Maybe on the return journey, she'd pick up some soda from Niles' drugstore. She dug into her pocket to see what she had. 2 singles, 1 $5, and 1 $10 bill. She pushed them down to the very bottom of her pocket so they wouldn't slip out. Picture. Got like this little figure here. I wonder what it is. The wind had become stronger in the time since she'd left the limits of Chicken Town, and a little more bracing. There was still the smell of spring green in the air, but there was something else besides, something Candy couldn't quite name, which teased her nevertheless. She walked towards the tower, her mind becoming pleasantly devoid of troubling thoughts. Miss Schwartz, letters threatening expulsion, her father in his drinking chair, staring up at her with that look of his. The look she knew meant trouble. All of it was left behind, where the street ended. Then her toe caught some object so that it skipped ahead of her through the grass. Just a stone, surely. Nevertheless, she bent down to take a closer look, and to her surprise, she saw that it was not a stone at all, but a shell. It was large, too, about the size of her balled fist. There were a number of short spikes on it. It wasn't, she knew, a snail's shell. For one thing, it was too big, and she had never seen a snail's shell with spikes. No, this was a seashell, and it was clearly old. Its colors had faded, but she could still see an elaborate pattern upon it, a design that followed its diminishing spiral. She turned it over, brushed what looked suspiciously like sand out of its crevice, and put it to her ear. It was a trick her grandfather had first taught her, listening to the sea in a shell, and though she knew it was just an illusion, the subtle reverberations of the air in the shell's interior, she was still half persuaded by it, half certain that she had heard the sound of waves, as if the shell still had some memory of its life in the ocean. She listened. There it was. But what was a seashell doing here? Had somebody dropped it while walking here? That seemed highly unlikely. Who went walking with seashells in their pocket? She looked down, wondering if anything else had been dropped in the vicinity. To her surprise, the answer was yes. There was a number of odd items scattered under her feet. More shells, for one thing. Dozens of them. No, hundreds. Some small, a few. Picture. So this is the tower out in the middle of the grass. So yeah, and there's the moon. A few, even larger than the one she'd picked up. Most were cracked or broken, but some were still intact. Their shapes and designs more beautiful, more bizarre than anything she'd ever seen in a book. And there was more besides, a lot more. As she studied the ground, her eyes becoming accustomed to picking out curiosities, the curiosities multiplied. There were pieces of wood scattered among the shells, most smoothed into little abstract sculptures by the pale, freckled sand that was mingled with the dark Minnesota dirt. As she bent to pick up one of the sculptures, she saw that there was glass here too. Countless fragments, green, blue, and white, turned into smoky jewels. She picked up 3 or 4 and examined them in the palm of her hand, walking a little way as she did so. There were more mysteries underfoot with every step she took. A large fish, its flesh picked away by birds, and the remains baked in the sun, and even a piece of pottery on which a fragment of an exquisite design remained, a blue figure staring at her with almost hypnotic intensity. Fascinated by all this, she paused to examine her finds more closely. As she did so, she caught a movement in the long grass out of the corner of her eye. She dropped down onto her haunches below the level of the tallest grass stalks, and there she stayed, suddenly and unaccountably nervous. She brushed the last of the sand off her fingers and watched for whatever had moved to move again. A hard gust of wind came through the glass, making it hiss as the stalks rubbed against one another. After perhaps a minute, during which the only motion was the bending of the grass, she decided to chance standing up. As she did so, the thing she'd been seen moving chose precisely the same moment to also stand upright, so that the pair of them, Candy and the stranger, rose like 2 swimmers emerging from a shallow sea. Candy let out a yelp of shock at the sight of the stranger, and then, once the shock had worn off, she started to laugh. The man, whoever he was wearing some kind of Halloween mask, or so it seemed. What other explanation could there be for his freakish appearance? His left eye was round and wild, while his right was narrow and sly, and his mouth, framed by a black mustache and a beard, was downturned in misery. But none of this was as odd as what sprouted from the top of his head. There were large downy ears, and above them 2 enormous antlers, which would have resembled those of a stag, except that there were 7 heads, 4 on the left horn and 3 on the right, growing from them. Heads with eyes, noses, and mouths. They weren't, she realized now, static, nor were they made of rubber and paper mache. In short, it was not a mask that the man was wearing. These heads, sprouting from the antlers, were alive. And they were all staring at Candy, the way that their owner was staring at her. 8 pairs of eyes all studying her with the same manic intensity. She was speechless, but they were not. After a moment of silence, the heads erupted into wild chatter, their manner highly agitated. Candy had no doubt about the subject of conversation. 1 minute, the heads were looking at her, and then they were facing one another, their volume rising as they attempted to out-talk one another. The only mouth that wasn't moving was that of the man himself. He simply studied Candy, and his wild and sly expression slowly becoming one of tentative inquiry. Pictures. We've got some of the things that Candy was finding in the grass. Bonus point, if anybody can send me a message about where they've seen this picture before. Finally, he decided to approach her. Candy let out a little gasp of fear, and in response, he raised his long-fingered hands as though to keep her from running away. The heads, meanwhile, were still chattering to one another. "Be quiet," he ordered them. "You're frightening the lady." All but one of the heads, the middle of the 2 on his right horn, a round-faced, sour individual, responded to his order. But this one kept talking. "Keep your distance from her, John Mischief," the head advised its big brother. "She may look harmless, but you can't trust them, any of them." "I said hush up, John Serpent," the man said, "and I mean it." The head made a face and muttered something under its breath, but finally stopped talking. "What's your name?" John Mischief asked "What's your name?" John Mischief asked Candy. "Me?" Candy said, as though there was anybody else in the vicinity to whom the question might be directed. "Oh, lordy Lou," another of the heads remarked. "Yes, you girl." "Be polite, John Sallow," John Mischief said, and reaching up, without taking his eyes off Candy, and lightly slapped the short-tempered head for its offense. Then, having hushed his companion, John Mischief said, "I do apologize for my brother, lady." Then, of all things, he bowed to her. It was not a deep bow, but there was something about the simple courtesy of the gesture that completely won Candy over. So what if John Mischief had 7 extra heads? He bowed to her and called her lady. No one had ever done that to her before. She smiled with improbable delight, and the impish man called John Mischief, along with 5 of his 7 siblings, smiled back. "Please," he said, "I don't wish to alarm you, lady. Believe me, that is the very last thing that I wish to do. But there is somebody in this vicinity by the name of Shape." "Mendelssohn Shape," the smallest of the heads said. "As John Moot said, Mendelssohn Shape." Before Candy could deal with any more information, she needed a question answered, so she asked it. "Are you all called John?" she said. "Oh, yes," said Mischief. "Tell her, brothers, left or right, tell her what we are called." So they did. And this part's a little hard for me because there's like so many voices, so I'll try my best here. John Fillet, John Sallow, John Moot, John Drowse, John Plucket, John Serpent, John Slop. "And I'm the head brother, the 8th wonder," replied. The 8th wonder replied, "John Mischief." "Yes, I heard that part. I'm Candy Quackenbush." "I am extremely pleased to make your acquaintance," John Mischief said. He sounded completely sincere in this, and with good reason. To judge by his appearance, things had not gone well for him, or them, of late. Mischief's striped blue shirt was full of holes, and there were stains on his loosely knotted tie, which were either food or blood. She guessed the latter. Then there was his smell. He was less than sweet, to say the least. His shirt clung to his chest, soaked with pungent sweat. "Have you been running from this man, Shape?" Candy said. "She's observant," John Plucket said appreciatively. "I like that. And young, which is good. She can help us, Mischief." "Either that, or she can get us in even deeper trouble," said John Serpent. "We're as deep as we can get," John Slop observed. "I say we trust the girl, Mischief. We've got absolutely nothing to lose." "What are they all talking about?" Candy asked Mischief. "Besides me." "The harbor," he replied. "What harbor?" Candy said. "There's no harbor here. This is Minnesota. We're hundreds of miles from the ocean. No, thousands." "Perhaps we're thousands of miles from any ocean that you are familiar with, lady," said John Fillet, with a gap-toothed smile. "But there are oceans and oceans, seas and seas." "What on earth is he talking about?" Candy asked Mischief. John Mischief pointed towards the tower that stood 60 or 70 yards from where they stood. "That, lady, is a lighthouse," he said. "No," said Candy with a smile. The idea was preposterous. Why would anyone... "Look at it," said John Drowse. "It's a lighthouse." Candy studied the odd tower again. Yes, she could see that indeed it could have been designed as a lighthouse. There were the rotted remains of a staircase, spiraling up the middle of it, leading to a room at the top, which might have housed a lamp. But so what? "Somebody was crazy," she remarked. "Why?" said John Slop. "Oh, come on," said Candy. "We've been through this. We're in Minnesota. There is no sea in..." Candy stopped mid-sentence. Mischief had put his hand to his mouth, hushing her. As he did so, all of his brothers looked off in one direction or another. A few were sniffing the air, others tasting it on their lips. Whatever they did, and wherever they looked, they all came to the same conclusion. And together they murmured 2 words. "Shapes here," they said. And that is the end of chapter 5, and we have a picture too. It's one of my favorite in the whole book. This is John Mischief and all of his brothers there up on his horns. And yeah, I just love this dude. And I love this chapter because this is the part where you can tell things officially become magical. So somewhere between chapter 4 and 5, like, we've kind of stepped out of the normal world. And I like to think that maybe that could happen if you just knew the right place to look. Anyway, I hope this video works, and I will do another chapter tomorrow, chapter 6. And remember, if you wanted to draw a picture, you could probably take a photo of the picture and send it either over Dojo or email or whatever, and we can give some bonus points, and we could also share your pictures with the rest of the class. So if you were drawing while you were listening, or if you want to go back and listen to the video again and draw something and send it in, that'd be great. As you may or may not have heard, today they extended our quarantine to April 1st. So we're going to be living like this for a while. So this is just one way to share something with you guys. So I miss you all. We all do. Miss R and Miss Nancy too. And I look forward to video chatting with you again. And I got to do something finally today that I've always wanted to do, but I've never had the chance to work from home. And that is do the whole suit on top, pajama pants on the bottom thing. So life goal achieved. So hope you guys are happy. Write back, send anything back. We miss you. Bye.